So after more than a week of speeches, reports and policy signals, what have we learned from China's biggest political gathering of the year? Well, we go live now to our bureau in Beijing with our correspondent Olivia Siong for more. So Olivia, take us through all the details.
I'll tell you, if there was a key message from these week-long meetings, it was that of Chinese leadership trying to project confidence. Confidence in the long-term trajectory of China's economy. And even though it faces headwinds at home with weak domestic consumption and abroad with that renewed trade row with the US, despite all that, that didn't stop China from announcing an ambitious GDP growth target of around 5% for another year, as well as more policy support. But where do we go from here? To discuss all that, I'm joined by my teammates, China correspondents Guan and Deborah Wong. Guys, a lot has happened in the past week. How would you sum it up in one sentence?
Well, to me, I reckon it would be known as the first two sessions that come right after the debut of the local Chinese AI model, DeepSeek, because that's really the talk of the town.
Debs?
And for me, I think there's a more perceptible shift towards the global south because China is reviewing its alliances.
Yeah, I was going to say that there were not really many surprises from these sessions compared to previous years, but then at the closing, we saw the absence of China's number 3 ranking official, Zhao Leji, from the meeting because of illness. But I would still say that policy-wise, things did go quite according to plan as well. But Guan, I do want to get your take here. Did the two sessions kind of live up to the expectations for this boost that analysts and observers had been calling for?
Well, two things can boost the economy. One is fiscal spending, the other one is interest rate cuts. As far as interest rates cut, well, all that was said was that there was room for a rate cut in a moderately loose monetary policy. That could disappoint some who think that the signaling is a bit muted, right? After all, some watchers think that this is the one solution that could ease many of China's problems, like indebted local governments, and finally may allow them to pay the contractors that they owe. It could allow businesses to finally expand and hire more people, essentially pour money into the system. On the other hand, Premier Li Qiang did announce deficit spending of 4% of GDP. That's 1 percentage point more, and that's quite a big deal because 3% is the line in the sand the IMF set has been prudent. And China has never crossed that 3% line except in a crisis, for example, COVID, right? 5% growth isn't exactly a crisis, but China faces problems like youth unemployment, sluggish consumption, global trade tensions. The very things that affects the so-called 获得感, 幸福感, or 安全感. The sense of gain, the sense of happiness, the sense of safety. The very things that the leadership has been talking about so much during the two sessions.
Deb, I also want to bring in another thing that we've had our eye on, which is, of course, China-US relations. There were many veiled and direct hits at the US from Chinese officials, but China wasn't really explicit in how it's going to handle the Trump administration moving forward, right?
I don't think China can be too explicit in this case because it needs to leave room for policy maneuvers. Things change on the go, especially the relationship between US and China. We're looking at a situation where Presidents Trump and Xi have not met in person yet, but now we're hearing reports of Trump potentially visiting China to meet Xi at the earliest in April. Now, China has not confirmed it. Regardless, China's stance towards foreign policy, especially the US, has always been consistent. They are talking about as major powers, they should learn to coexist peacefully. They should not be suppressing smaller powers as well. The language we're hearing, the tone, is all geared towards peace, dialogue, consultation, and I think that's important because it gives them time and space to respond to any evolving geopolitical situation.
I think there was also another very clear message when it came to officials talking about the China-US tensions, and that is relating to the intensifying tech race, especially as we've seen that breakthrough with DeepSeek despite US export controls. And I also just want to point out, I don't know if you remember last year, we were talking a lot about electric vehicles, solar panels, renewables, but this year it seems like we're talking about new tech, even newer tech when it relates to 6G or especially artificial intelligence. And we just want to have a listen to the foreign minister and see how he described it.
但哪里有封锁，哪里就有突围；哪里有打压，哪里就有创新。暴风雨最猛烈的地方，恰恰是哪吒闹海，一飞冲天的舞台。
But Guan, there's this hype about DeepSeek, but we also know the US is now considering banning the app on its government devices. Other countries have also moved to implement similar restrictions. But China seems even more resolute to push forward with AI innovation. Why?
Because China has been sitting on the sidelines and watching its local AI models lag behind its foreign counterparts for the longest time. And finally, it now has an AI model that ticks all the boxes. Let's just count the ways, right? Homegrown, right? Reasonably and reliable, right? It toes the government line, it sells sensors, it's cheap to operate, right? And it's also open source, which means to the Chinese government, you can easily apply it across the board, right? And there's another reason why DeepSeek has become so much of a government darling, because for the longest time, the Chinese government has been trying to get the tech big boys, right, to invest more in basic research, right? And instead of just trying to grab a quick buck, in trying to apply the technology. But here comes DeepSeek, right, who isn't taking any state funding as far as we know, and it's investing heavily in basic AI research. So Beijing is trying to hold it up as a shining example, as what tech firms need to do to advance Chinese modernization.
I just want to quickly also touch on how there was a lot of talk about AI adoption, whether it's elder care or in public services. But how do people feel about AI being a bigger part of their lives? Let's have a listen.
今天开早会，公司还在分享这个关于 AI 的这个应用，可能这是 AI 的元年，大家都在等于也是一种潮流嘛。
查询啊，还有就是学习啊，包括做 PPT 啊、训练什么的。可能会担心信息泄露吧，就是如果我传什么文件或者我提供我的什么信息上去，这个信息会不会就是被他给用来做什么吧？
我觉得那个 DeepSeek 来了之后呢，它的这个算法确实是领先了这个我们国内的这个算法还是很强的，对。然后但是我们的硬件，然后我觉得 GPU 这一块还是缺少一块，但是已经弥补了这个差距。
Debs, there is a vision, but there's the road to get there. How much do we know about the game plan?
So at this point, I want to pull up a graphic, and it's going to show you the list of policies that the Chinese government has laid out to support tech. So we're looking at a lot of money. There's going to be a new fund to support tech startups, AI, quantum tech growth, and we're also looking at refining processes to register tech bonds. So basically, analysts are saying that all these contribute to building investor optimism in China, and also, we've heard a call for tolerance and patience because investing in all these startups, the tech innovation, is high risk. It's going to be unpredictable, but they need room to grow. They need room to experience failure as well. And what we've seen with the success of NERTA and DeepSeek, government intervention is not always necessary. Authorities recognize that. They say that yes, we need to legislate, but we also need to give them room to innovate. And the message here is that we're going to give you space. We're not going to interfere, but you can tap on us if you need us.
We're just going to pause our discussion here, and we know this is just more than about shiny, new, exciting tech. There are a lot of other details to go on. Can DeepSeek success be replicated? And we'll come back to that, but for now, back to you, Ateli.